You good? Yep. All right.
All right, Derek. Sarah, Lost in Reviews. I'm going to quote the trailer because I think it very much sums up the film. One moment defines your life, one decision becomes your legacy, one place is where it all collides. Did you cut that trailer?
No.
Well, it's a beautiful trailer.
Yeah, focus features. Yeah, great trailer cutters.
After seeing the film, I kind of feel like I want you to be my English teacher and tell me what all the underlying things that are going on. Because I see from the film that, yes, this one action led to years and years of consequences, but I feel like there was so much more underneath.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I was reading or watching poetry, and I just can't grasp all the little nuanced things that are going on.
Yeah. Well, I love movies that you have to see more than once. You know, all of my favorite films, you know, I've revisited numerous times in my life, and I think the mark of a great film is one that, you know, the more times you watch it, the further, you know, you can delve into it, the more that you can discover within it. So, you know, Place Beyond the Pines, that's the kind of film I was aspiring to make, is a film that you could watch on multiple occasions. You could watch throughout your life. And I love movies that are like friends of mine, and I visit them and they change as I change, you know. You can come up with a log line of the film of like, this is what happens narratively, you know, this is the story, this is the character, but then also there's a whole world that happens outside of a movie, you know, like with people's backstory that influences it, you know, like where, you know, Luke, for instance, is a guy who grew up without a father, you know, and now all of a sudden he has this baby. And he doesn't feel worthy to be this guy's father, but at the same time, he's not going to let that kid feel the same way he felt when he was a kid, you know? So he overcompensates, you know? Bradley Cooper's character is a guy who, you know, his father's a famous, kind of royalty in this small town of Schenectady, a judge, and he expects his son to kind of follow in his footsteps and go into political life. But Avery, when we first meet him, has decided to be a cop because he wants to be his own man. He wants to find his own version of good and evil, you know? He wants to see it in his own terms, but he was never meant to do that. And so in this one moment, he also overcompensates. And it's, you know, a lot of this movie is about trying to avoid your destiny. And I feel like anytime you try to avoid something, you go out of your way to try to avoid something, there's a likelihood that you'll crash into it. One time my wife, she took my computer into the city, into Manhattan. I live in Brooklyn. And I had been reading on this like parents' website that there had been a string of robberies in my neighborhood, people getting their computers stolen. So I told her, I said, whatever you do, just take a cab home. Don't take the subway because people begin jacked for their computers off the subway. So she says, oh, I'll just take the subway. I was like, do not take the subway, take a cab. So she gets into a cab. The cab drives her to the Manhattan Bridge in Manhattan. In this cab, he gets squirrely. Cab drivers don't often like to go to Brooklyn because it takes, and he says, no, I'm not taking it. He stopped his cab, told her to get out of the cab. She, you know, gets out of the cab, has to find another cab, comes home. I was like, hey, good thing you're home. Where's the computer? She left it in the first guy's cab, you know, and if I would have just let her just take the subway and just not overthink it, you know what I mean, and not try to avoid it, everything would have been fine. So to me, that's a little antidote.
Yeah, there's a lot of background that you don't really see. Just Luke crying in the church during, something's happened in his life and you don't know exactly what it is, but you know he hasn't had that great of a life. So it's just like little things like that.
Yeah.
You can tell there's stuff, and it's not like you didn't have to exactly point it all out or have it all in the film, but you just know.
You know, that's what we were talking about in here earlier. It's like I love active participants in the view with audiences. I like the audience's imagination to be turned on when they're watching a movie. I know I love that when I'm watching a movie. We were talking about Alien earlier. It's so great when you watch Alien. There's so many mysteries about what's this ship, what's this big creature, you know, like sitting in this chair with this thing that, what's it look like, a satellite or some kind of telescope, or is that a gun? There's no explanation for everything. It's just showing something, and there's a truth all around it. There's a reason why Ryan ends up crying in that church. But it doesn't have to be explained, and it doesn't have to be hammered down your throat. You can, as an audience member, have, you know, I'm trying to respect you as an audience member to have your own thoughts. You don't only have to have my thoughts in the movie, you know? You don't only have to see the movie that everyone is seeing next to you. You know, you can see it in a personal way. So I like to make, that's the kind of cinema I respond to. You know, and I was an audience member long before I ever was making my own films. So when I make films, I just think as that audience member, what do I want to see?
Yeah. One of my new favorite actors is Dane DeHaan. Is that his? Brilliant. Lawless was my favorite movie from last year.
Oh, nice.
He's great in that. He's also in this. How did you find him? How did you cast him? What was your experience working with him?
Yeah, I had seen like 500 kids to play those roles of Jason and AJ. And Dane was originally slated to come in to read for AJ, who was Bradley Cooper's son. But he told my casting director he didn't think he was AJ. He thought he was more Jason. And she says, well, we're looking at you for AJ. And he says, well, I'm not going to be AJ, but here's a tape of me doing Jason. And so she says, there's this guy who wouldn't do AJ. I was like, who is he? You know, it's kind of arrogant, this kid, you know? Who does he think, you know? He thinks he knows better. I was like, okay, well, forget it then. Let's just keep looking. So this is like 6 weeks go by. I'm still looking. Can't find anybody. It's getting desperate. I'm like 7 weeks out of production, and I still haven't found the guy. And I was like, what about that tape? Let me take a look at it. So I watched his casting tape, and I couldn't stop watching it. He was absolutely right, you know what I mean? So he came in, you know, he flew back from Chronicle, and he came into a reading with me, and I immediately trusted him. I trusted him because he knew better than me. You know what I mean? He knew which guy he was, so I cast him in there. And then came the challenge of casting AJ, who was going to play opposite him. And, you know, there's these things called chemistry readings, which are, you know, it's kind of like the term du jour in Hollywood, you know, get two actors together to see how their chemistry is. But I had, you know, Dane in a room with a bunch of guys that were going to play AJ, and Emory Cohen comes in, who plays AJ, and they were sitting in chairs next to each other, and there was something going on between them. They looked like young lions or something, young wolves, you know, like kind of sniffing each other out. You know, they each had kind of like, you know, little chips on their shoulder or whatever. And then I asked them, I said, you guys, you know, break icebreaker. I asked them an icebreaker question. I said, who's your favorite actor? And Emory said, no question, Marlon Brando. And Dane said, I always liked James Dean. And then they proceeded to argue with each other for 10 minutes about who was better, Brando or James Dean. And I just sat back, and I didn't have to do a thing. I just sat back and watched this thing. I was like, how great. I can just put this into the movie and let it go. I said, okay, we can all agree. We can agree to disagree. You like Brando, you like James Dean. Name someone else. And Dane says, well, I always liked Al Pacino. And Emory was shaking his head. He says, De Niro. And then they went off on De Niro, Pacino for a little bit. And so I loved their ambition. You know what I mean? I loved how they saw things about, you know, and their passion.
Yeah.
And they were like those, you know, to me, they're heirs to those thrones, you know?
Fantastic. Thank you very much,
Yeah.
Derek.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
Thank you. It was a beautiful
Yeah.
film.